Will Wade told us all that he was eyeing the date of May the 28th to have a finalized roster. If you look at your watch today is the 27th. Do we have a decision that may be imminent?
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Happy Tuesday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. Back here in action on Tuesday. Certainly hope you all enjoyed your Memorial Day weekend and remembering why we had one of those. But getting back onto the topic here of Will Wade, this basketball roster, he told us a little over a week ago that he was eyeing the date of May the 28th, that we would have a pretty damn good roster. We had the monstrous portal splash of Darian Williams at the end of last week, our biggest fish of the offseason to date. And we're looking at what seems to be just one final substantial piece of this roster left to fill. There's been another crystal ball floating out there, and it is for UNC's Ven-Allen Lubin. Kenton, do you think that Will Wade's going to take a dirty foot clubber to finalize his year one roster?
I honestly and truly could see this happening. We talk about the need for a big man, and now with some new information that's presented itself, you are looking at an additional potential need for a big man that what already was present in terms of roster construction. I would not be surprised to see Ven-Allen Lubin be one of the guys that finish or that rounds out this roster. And, you know, at the end of the day, he does bring a ton of experience. He does bring a veteran presence in that locker room. He does bring a guy that's played high-level basketball, that's come with the expectation and the pressure and whatnot. So I wouldn't be shocked to see Ven-Allen Lubin be the person that finishes out this roster.
We first spoke about Ven-Allen Lubin a couple weeks ago when his name was initially kind of floated out with potential links to NC State. And then after that, things kind of went quiet. And we discussed initially Ven-Allen Lubin's plan was to enter the transfer portal with the ongoing settlement going on with the NCAA. Still to this day, don't really understand what his full plan was, but he said that he wanted to return to UNC after entering the portal. Well, as we understand, Hubert Davis and Carolina essentially closed the door behind him, leaving him in the transfer portal. Then after that, NC State and Mississippi State were the two teams with the most connection to him. Then, of course, weeks have gone by, and yet now he pops up again. I saw Corey Smith and Pack Bride, and I think there was another crystal ball floating out there, if I'm not mistaken. Ven-Allen Lubin potentially heading to Raleigh to join Will Wade and what looks to be occupying the last roster spot. It makes a lot of sense. And the additional information that which Kenton referenced there, I don't think it's any reason for panic, but I've heard some things about potentially some eligibility hurdles to clear for Paul Mbia, the 6'11" center that we're picking up from France via the Congo. We all remember how it was with Ismail Diouf, and he had to sit out a couple games in the very beginning of the season due to formerly playing pro ball overseas, and I think it was only 2 games for Diouf, but we'll see what the case potentially would be for Mbia. But I believe the circumstances are he potentially have to sit out a couple games. Again, I don't think it's any reason for panic, but that's something that makes Ven-Allen Lubin that much more important to potentially get across the finish line. You're going to need a starter, a person that can play the 5 with comfortability right from go. Not only that, but even when Mbia is fully cleared to be a go, you still want to have valuable depth that you can trust, and Ven-Allen Lubin would be exactly that. To Kenton's point, he's played 3 previous years of P5 ball, Notre Dame, Vanderbilt, in this past season with Carolina. Said before also, he was one of Carolina's best players down the stretch in the latter half of their season. So provides a lot of experience, a lot of depth in that front court. And this is something that NC State is still looking to have. So certainly a couple other circumstances as well for needing a guy like Ven-Allen Lubin. But I'll also pose this to you, Kenton. Let's say Paul Mbia is a full go. Let's say Ven-Allen Lubin does come to NC State. Who would you project to be the starter on opening night?
I don't think anybody would say or argue that Paul Mbia does not have a higher ceiling than what we've seen out of Ven-Allen Lubin. However, I also don't think anybody would argue that Paul Mbia has a lower floor than what we've seen out of Ven-Allen Lubin. And with that in mind, with the idea of who's just going to know their role and play that role well, I wouldn't be surprised to see Ven-Allen Lubin be the guy. But also, on top of that, it's a thing called KYP, Know Your Personnel, which normally applies to players, but I'm going to apply it to a coach here because in knowing Will Wade, he hasn't been risk averse in terms of starting guys that are a little bit more on the raw side and all that good stuff. So if you had to tell me night one, I've got to take the mortgage out and bet it on one of these guys, I'd be more inclined to say Ven-Allen Lubin, but I wouldn't be shocked either way.
Said it well. I think the ceiling is higher for Paul Mbia, but I think when you're looking for consistency and stability, especially early in the season when you might only have one to play with, Ven-Allen Lubin would make a ton of sense to get the early starter minutes at the 5. That's all arbitrary anyway, because things will certainly change as the season goes on. But when you're looking at Paul Mbia, and this is something I believe I said very early on when NC State was connected to him before things went quiet and he kind of reappeared, I'd be interested to see what his prior experience, how it would translate to NC State and playing in the ACC. Because yes, he is playing in a professional league in France, but France is not the ACC. France is not D1 collegiate college basketball. And
Absolutely
I'd venture
not.
to guess that the ACC and D1 collegiate basketball is probably a level or two above a 21 and under league in France. So I don't even know if I could comfortably say that Paul Mbia would be a full 100%. This is your starter beyond a shadow of a doubt. I think what Ven-Allen Lubin can give you from an experience standpoint, that alone can make him valuable enough to start early on. And even if Mbia is rotating in, he's learning from somebody that's been here, done that. He's learning the system, learning the league, learning the competition. That can be a very valuable timeline for somebody that's coming over to play in the States for the first time. So on multiple different levels, I do think that Ven-Allen Lubin would be a very valuable addition to this team from a depth and experience standpoint. But also when you're looking at the front court playing immediately from night one, you might need a guy like that.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about, like you said, experience playing this game, knowing the rules of this game, seeing how ACC referees are going to do it. Like you said, 3 years of Power 4 basketball, 2 of those years being in the ACC. You're playing at Notre Dame. You're playing with the Dirty Foot Club. So you know how, certain officials like to do things. You know how tight whistles can get or which crews are liable to be more or less lean and all those types of things. It's just the little things sometimes make a mountain of difference when you talk about the little things compounding and piling up. And I think that, again, those little differences, when you say night one, who's going to be your starter, I think that I could say Ven-Allen Lubin would slide in here. But I also want to say I'd be comfortable with either one of these guys. I wouldn't be worried if Mbia is the guy from night one because, again, he's shown a freakish level of athleticism. And he is built in a way that's like, hey, good luck backing him down. So either one of these guys, I'm not upset at it. I'm not saying, oh, boy, we're in trouble if either one of these guys start because we've seen in the past front courts where it's like, please, if anything happens to this one guy, we are cooked. It is over. And so, it's never a problem to not have that situation.
Yeah, we've had to learn the hard way with a very thin front court. What one injury in the first, 3 minutes of a season, how that can completely change the trajectory of said season. So not trying to go through that again. Ven-Allen Lubin to NC State, finalizing this year one roster. It makes all the sense in the world to me, especially after the money situations have kind of sorted themselves out. We'll talk more about PJ Haggerty here in just 1 minute, but this makes a lot of sense to me. And I think if Will Wade's looking to finalize this roster by the date that he thought that he would, May the 28th, I would expect a decision to be made here in the next 24 to 48 hours. And like I said, coming up next, we will talk about PJ Haggerty, committed to not NC State, but Kansas State over this weekend. What does that mean for NC State and what happened behind the scenes? More on this after a quick word from our sponsors. Our Tuesday show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where the heck did all my money go? Between dining out, shopping online, and entertainment, sometimes it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes into play. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in just one place so you can stop managing your money and start building your wealth. Managing your money with your partner is also now smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all of the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's Monarch like the butterfly, money like the money, monarchmoney.com using code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College, for 50% off of your first year. Only at Monarch Money. Middle portion of our Tuesday show, time to talk about PJ Haggerty. And obviously, NC State has been all over PJ Haggerty for a number of weeks now. We are closely following his performances in the NBA Draft Combine. It was widely believed that NC State had all the momentum for PJ Haggerty. They seemed to be comfortably in the front-runner position. I will explain this to you how it was explained to me from a source that I trust. So essentially, NC State and PJ Haggerty had what was like a verbal agreement before he went into the NBA Draft Combine. It was believed that he would choose NC State after coming back out of the Combine. Regardless of how things went, it was expected that he would be in Raleigh. What happened after that was he performed well. His dad is his agent. He has been the one that's doing the negotiating and contacting teams, which we have our own concerns about separately. They came back to the table after the NBA Draft Combine and said, well, things went really well. Let's see if we can work on this a little bit more. Will Wade and Andrew Slater say, that's not how we do things. That's not how we do business. We stick to our guns. We've had a plan this whole time. Going back on that now goes against the entire process of which we've handled things to this point. So they told PJ Haggerty and his camp, no longer interested. We wish you the best of luck. And that instant pivot is where you saw Darian Williams happen. And once Darian Williams happened, PJ Haggerty was completely off of the table. Because remember, what I said pretty consistently is, I believe this entire time, this situation was going to be an either or. I don't think that NC State ever was going to have the money to reel in both. It was fun to play with the hypotheticals. And again, with Will Wade, what can you really rule out? Because he's capable of virtually anything. But I always believed it to be an either or. And once you saw Darian Williams commit, that was the either.
I look at this situation, and Grayson, you're absolutely right. You talk about, good counsel and all that good stuff and having parents be the agent and all that type of deal. I'm going to say this. This is not stuff that we have seen with our own two eyes. Okay, we are in the room where these negotiations are happening or whatever the case may be. However, great friend of mine, NC State Wolfpacker himself, Parth Updaya, who now works covering Memphis, has talked about what the alleged number was at Memphis. And that was higher than the alleged number that the young man is getting at Kansas State. Again, this is alleged. The alleged number that I heard from NC State was higher than the number that I have heard from K-State. And so I look at this and I say to myself, this is where that old song comes in. You got to know when to hold them. You got to know when to fold them, know when to hold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. You never count your money while you're sitting at the table. And we saw some of these violations happen here, as we've seen in very recent history in NIL, where it's like you don't know when to say, all right, the getting's good, let's get it. And you end up getting got because you can't really do that. And so it's disappointing, of course, but it is what it is. And Grayson and I have very – well, I wouldn't even say Grayson and I have very different stances on why players go different places and all that good stuff. But what I will say is Grayson and I have been on very different sides of the fence in terms of why players have gone places. Yes. We have been there. This is one where Grayson and I both are in lockstep here in that unless everybody is telling the same lie on one young man in his camp here, it's very clear that this was a situation where the hand just got overplayed, and more power to him. I hope that Kansas State works out for him. I wish the best for the young man. I don't know him personally. I don't know his camp personally. I'm not going to say anything negative or degrading about him. It just seems like this was a situation where you lose out on $500K. Maybe he's a small town guy that Manhattan is a better scene for him than Memphis or Raleigh. Maybe that's the situation. But from the outside looking in, it just looks like regardless of where you are, you've seemingly cost yourself money by saying, I've got to get every single penny.
This has turned out to be the Nico Iamaleava situation, but on the college basketball side, because PJ Haggerty could have made more money to stay there at Memphis. Apparently, they were offering upwards of $2.5 million, possibly even $3 million. NC State, what I have heard, was offering right around $3 million, but instead he's taking $2 million with incentives, which I don't know how that works with NIL, but apparently taking incentives as well with Kansas State to go there instead. So any way you cut it or slice it here, they've essentially played with their money. They could have had more if that's what they were seeking, and instead they had to take what was the last offer on the table to play at Kansas State. Now, the real losers in this situation might be the Kansas Jayhawks, because Kansas missed out on Darian Williams because NC State got him. PJ Haggerty ends up at K-State. That's a great get for K-State because they're getting him at a discounted price. That is why things happen the way they happen. Once NC State removed themselves from the PJ Haggerty sweepstakes and took Darian Williams, that then left PJ Haggerty on the table for K-State. NC State was not going to take both. It was an either-or situation. And once PJ Haggerty played his hand, Will Wade and Andrew Slater played theirs and took Darian Williams. So one last pivot here. We've said this multiple times already, but how great does it feel to have a GM that is so surgical like Andrew Slater? A GM and a head coach that knows their plan, and they stick to their plan no matter what. They will not reach, and they will not overpay. They will not play games with deals they feel like they're getting played on. That is so incredibly valuable to have a front office staff like that. And it's not something that NC State has really ever had before. So we're still processing how good, in fact, it feels. I'm so happy with the way that Slater and Wade and Patrick Stacey as well, he deserves a lot of credit for that, the financial guy on staff. The way they have moved throughout this entire offseason, strategically going through all the candidates, making the right decisions at the right times, it's putting NC State in a position. I mean, you're looking at a top 25 roster here in year one. You're going to have to accomplish that on the court, but you're getting yourself in the right position to achieve everything that you want to achieve in year one. Big time kudos to the staff for laying out exactly what they wanted to do and execute it thereafter.
Yeah, and just a quick word here. Grayson and I, after one of our recent trips to Emilio's, I had to confiscate his robbery bandana because Will Wade said that we're going to have to rob a bank to get both. And Grayson was geeked up to go. I said, what are you doing with that mask, Grayson? What are you doing with that there bandana? What's going on here? So, don't worry, Banks of Raleigh. You all are safe. The Triangle area. I have gotten Grayson under control here. And in all seriousness here, I want to say that you talk about a guy potentially losing money in that way, and you talk about a situation where you end up as a school, like you said, with Kansas, where you end up with neither one of these guys. It's tough to not say, hey, things didn't go great there. You did not get what you wanted out of this situation, which is, it's very unfortunate for them. But the PJ Haggerty trade is now complete between Memphis and Kansas State, as their point guard went to Memphis. Memphis point guard goes to Kansas, and all was well in the world.
Memphis gets Doug McDaniel from K-State. K-State gets PJ Haggerty from Memphis. NC State grabs Darian Williams right from out under the nose of the Kansas Jayhawks. Seems like everyone wins for the most part, outside of Kansas, of course, but it's hard to feel bad about Kansas. They've been a blue blood forever, and usually they get whatever they want. But by all accounts, K-State, you're in great shape now. You got PJ Haggerty. NC State's over the moon with Darian Williams. Memphis feels comfortable with what they have under Penny Hardaway. Wins across the board. But PJ Haggerty going to K-State was not a business decision from PJ. That was a business decision from Will Wade, Andrew Slater, and the NC State staff. So very interesting developments here as we inch toward this May 28th, I guess, deadline. We'll see what else Will Wade has up his sleeve by the time this week is over. But by all accounts, it seems like most teams are happy with what they got out of this sweepstakes. And coming up next, we're rounding out our Tuesday show. NC State baseball has received their postseason, I guess, assignment, if you want to call it that. They will be the 2 seed in the Auburn Regional. Let's see what they will have to play for coming up on Friday in the opening rounds. More on this after a quick word from our sponsors. Last couple minutes of our Tuesday show, switching gears and talking some NC State baseball. On Friday's show, we covered the very disappointing exit from the ACC tournament, a 7-6 loss to Clemson. Certainly hated to not see NC State playing in the semis and the final out in Durham. Felt like we had a really good chance to do so. But the wheels keep on moving here. It's time for more postseason baseball. The NCAA tournament will begin on Friday. NC State is in it. They will be the 2 seed in the Auburn Regional. Auburn obviously being the number 4 overall seed. They will be the host seed, the 1 seed. The Stetson Hatters are the 3 seed, and the Central Connecticut Blue Devils will be the 4 seed. So NC State will square off with Stetson in Game 1 of the Auburn Regional on Friday. I will advise you, don't overlook the Hatters. They are a very solid program.
Yeah, don't overlook the Hatters, not only because they're a solid program, but have we not seen NC State, this iteration of Pac-9, lose to non-solid programs? Have we not seen this team absolutely, have we not seen this team absolutely wet the bed in moments where you couldn't? Looking at the Stanford series here, all you had to do was get yourself 2, and that was it. You get yourself 2. You win that series, you win the ACC. And we were not capable of doing it. So I would not overlook Stetson for multiple reasons here. The main one of which, who do you think you are to overlook anybody? That Stanford team wouldn't make the tournament in the month of Sundays unless there was some mass exodus of every player playing college baseball for, hundreds of teams nationally. They're not getting in, and we could not muster up a single thing against them offensively to get enough to get over the hump and win that series and thusly win the conference in terms of regular season. So don't sleep on this Stetson team. It's about confidence. It's about this team showing up in the right way. This is one of the first times that an Elliott Avon-led team has gone to the NCAA tournament after reaching Omaha in the year before. Continue to be different. Continue to be different. Don't just be a team that's happy to be there, because that's not enough. They should be pissed off. They should be pissed off about the way the season ended in terms of everything after that Clemson series win just being at best a wash. Everything after that was at best a wash. There were multiple times where you kind of stuck scratching your head and saying, what's happening? So at this point in time, at this juncture in the ball game, this team needs to go into it with the mindset of dominance. Not just win, dominate everybody in front of us.
They're in certainly no position to be overlooking anyone at this point in the season, especially not how they've played down the stretch. Auburn in itself, the 1 seed in this region, is one of the best teams in the country. They're the number 4 overall seed. They had a spectacular season within the SEC this year. But I will say, something that we've noticed in NC State picking up the 2 seed in SEC regionals typically wages pretty well for the Wolfpack. In fact, the last couple times where Georgia, we won that, went to Omaha. Arkansas in 2021, the number 1 overall seed, NC State went on the road, took care of business there. The Homa Hogs kept them at home. NC State advanced to Omaha in 2021. I believe 2 of the last 4 times NC State has advanced out of an SEC regional. 2023 lost to South Carolina. All the way back in 2018, NC State lost to Kentucky in the Lexington regional. So a mixed bag, but NC State certainly has the team to go to Auburn and beat Auburn. But it's going to take that iteration of the previous time we played Clemson this year, the 3-game series where it looked like anything that could go right did go right. The pitching was pristine. The offense was on task. The defense was up to par. Any mental mistakes were at an absolute 0, but we've not seen that version of NC State since that point. But with Ryan Marone, Rom-Com Dom, and possibly Anderson Nance, now that you're in the full postseason, potentially getting a start on the mound, you have the pitching staff. The exact same thing I told you about the ACC tournament, it's still true in a regional or super regional. You have the pitching staff to get it done, but you cannot beat yourselves. You cannot beat yourselves and expect to beat a Stetson. Do not overlook them. They're a solid team. You cannot beat yourselves and expect to beat Auburn. They're one of the top teams in the country. And not putting the cart in front of the horse, because it doesn't matter unless we get out of Auburn. But if you do get out of Auburn, you'd be potentially looking at going to Coastal for a super regional if they win their regional. The 4-seed Auburn and the 13-seeded Coastal Carolina are matched up for a super. So you'd be playing either Coastal in Coastal, you'd be playing ECU in Raleigh. Hello, I think the internet would melt if something like that happened. Or you'd be playing the Florida Gators in Raleigh. Or just for transparency, if the Fairfield Stags, the 4-seed in the Conway Regional, if they make it out and NC State also makes it out, they will be coming to NC State. Obviously, it's one foot in front of the other, and you got to handle business in Auburn first. But if NC State decides to get hot right now at the right moment, you might be looking at a pretty decent path to get back to Omaha yet again. But the NCAA tournament journey for NC State this year will begin on Friday, 2 p.m. against the Stetson Hatters down in Auburn. Should be a great game, and NC State, no position to be overlooking anyone. That will do it for us here on Tuesday. As always, thank you all so much for joining us. Be sure to hit that like button, drop your comments in the comment box. Give us your thoughts on potentially UNC's Ven-Allen Lubin coming to NC State to finalize the last roster spot for Will Wade in year one. Give us your thoughts on PJ Haggerty to not NC State, but K-State, and the way that all of that played out with Darian Williams coming to State, PJ Haggerty to Manhattan, and any of the other fallout. Give us your thoughts there. And lastly, NC State baseball, the 2 seed in the Auburn Regional. Do you like the Wolfpack's chances to advance out of Auburn and face maybe an ECU in Raleigh? More on that as the week goes on, but that will do it for us here on Tuesday. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you have not already. We'll see y'all tomorrow on Wednesday for more. And until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.